Welcome to On the Call. I'm Jeff Rimmer, and it's really a pleasure and honor to visit with a longtime friend and arguably one of the top players in the history of the National Hockey League. You know him well as a broadcaster. You know him well as a general manager in the National Hockey League. But for me, Phil Esposito was one of the premier players in the National Hockey League, and it's a pleasure to share this time with them. Phil, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Jeff.
My question to you is, how have you hung on here during this pandemic, and exactly what are you doing to keep you busy besides the golf course for 4 hours?
Well, yeah. I have two grandkids living with us. One came from college on spring break and never left because of the virus, and the other one just came in from the Czech Republic.
Wow.
And so they're with us, and I have a mother-in-law that's next door that we put in there that we have to take care of. She's 90, so that's been a very hectic time. And I've been doing not this Zoom, but doing things on the phone and stuff like that, and playing golf. And I actually went to a restaurant the other night for the first time and had dinner, and it was wonderful to do.
That's great. Great to hear. And of course, the situation here, such as it is, everybody looking forward to the resumption of hockey. And it appears, if this latest news is, and it's a fluid situation, we might get back to seeing the National Hockey League return and see the end of the pause. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are we're going to play sometime this year because there's too much money involved from television. Whether we have fans in the building, I'm not sure, but it seems to me if you've got an 18,000 seat arena, say, and you put 25% capacity, you're going to have at least 5,000 people and separate them the way you want, which would give a little bit more ambiance to the broadcasts or what have you. Now, I've been told that if we do get back, we'd be broadcasting by watching it on TV, which I've done before, by the way, Jeff. I've done color in the playoffs when my partner, David Mishkin's wife, had breast cancer and she had to go in for surgery. And we went to the studio here in Tampa Bay and did the games, and nobody knew that we were not doing them live. So it's a possibility that you could do that. I'm not sure I like that, though. I mean, I like the ambience, too, like everybody else. It gets me more into the game.
I want to start in terms of your career. And for me, of course, you originally were a Chicago Blackhawk and then traded to the Boston Bruins. And the success that you had, two-time Stanley Cup champion, and the character and the leadership and the talent that was on that Boston team. Esposito, Orr, Sanderson, Cheevers, Vadnais. I mean, we're talking about some of the best players in the National Hockey League, many Hall of Famers.
Busick.
What's that?
The Chief, Busick.
Absolutely. Still the leading goal scorer in the history of the Boston Bruins. I mean,
I know.
What was it like? You were the second leading scorer as I recall, in the Bruins at last report.
No idea.
But what was it like? You won those cups in the early 70s. I know a week or so ago, the goal, it was the 50th anniversary of the historic goal by Bobby Orr flying through the air. But what was it like playing on that team and being part of the leadership core and the character on Cashman? How can we forget Wayne Cashman, your line mate?
Well, let me put it this way, Jeff. When I went to training camp after being traded, I wasn't sure. Training camp was in London, Ontario. I wasn't sure how I'd be received. You know, it's the first time going to a different team, and I had 4 years actually with Chicago, including the training camps. And so it was a little different. They were different guys. Not only did I get traded that year, Sanderson made the team out of junior, and they traded for Eddie Shack.
Huh.
And I'll never forget this. I went into the locker room early to meet with Frosty, John Forrestal, and Dan Canny, the trainers, because I wanted to get my equipment all set. And I went in like an hour before they even had to show up. And about half an hour before they all had to show up, I hear this, hi ho, it's off to work I go. And the door slams over, and there's Shacky with his skates, a stick and his skates hanging over like you see it when you're a kid. And he goes, here I am, Shaq is here, let's get it going. And I thought, wow, this is going to be fun. And it turned out to be fun. And we really, really got along. Don't get me wrong, when we scrimmaged, we even fought against each other. But afterward, it was all the team. Everybody went for a beer. You know, it was 15 cents a draft back then. You put a buck on the table, you get snookered for it, you know what I mean? And we all went after practices. And we even fought one time in the bar between ourselves. So, but we became a very close-knit unit. And it was really, really something to see. And when we made the playoffs the first year I was there, and we were in Montreal, we lost to Montreal, and going through Dorval Airport, I went and was going to have a drink of water, and Harry Sinden was having a drink, and as Harry got back, and I said, you know what, Harry, I know we lost, but we're going to win the Stanley Cup in 3 years. And he said, what is it, from God's lips to your ears or something? And I went, I'm telling you, I feel it. And we did. We won it in 3 years. And basically pretty much the same team. And we should have won it the next year too. We should have. But the problem was, Jeff, the Bruins had problems beating the Canadians. The Canadians had problems beating the Rangers. The Bruins never had any problem beating the Rangers. The Rangers could not beat us. And we all knew that. And think about the years we won the Cups. We beat the Rangers.
That's true. Now, 1972, and I remember as if it was yesterday. I was living in Western Canada, just finishing up university, and the 72 Canada-Russia series, for me, one of the biggest highlights, and specifically Game 4. After Game 4 in Vancouver, you went on television. It was a tough night for Team Canada before you were heading to Russia for those last 4 games. And boy, were you, in your interview with Johnny Esau, and I'll never forget it, you were quite outspoken about the Canadian fans, and really they're surprised that the Russians gave you guys as much trouble as they did in those first 4 games.
Well, I remember being picked as star of the game, so on the Canadian side, and I went out there, and as I skating out there, Boris Mikhailov was picked as the guy for the Russian team, and I went over there, and there were 3 guys in their 20s, probably 24, 25, somewhere around there. They were just yelling obscenities at me, and it just riled me up. And when Johnny asked me the question, I just went off. And I never saw that interview for 10 years. The 10-year anniversary, I went up to Toronto. We all went up there to the brewery, and I saw the film, I saw the video or whatever. And the first time I saw it, I was kind of embarrassed. But then I thought about it after. I had won the MVP. We won the Stanley Cup. We won the scoring championship. I was first. What the hell were they going to do with me? I was doing it for nothing. Are you kidding me? Jeff, I turned it down 3 times before I said yes. First from Harry, then Fergie, and actually the 3rd time I took it. Bobby Orr called me, and he said, Phil, he said, I can't play, and we really need you and your brother. Now, my brother Tony said, don't you accept it, because I do not want to play. And I understood that, neither did I. But when Bobby asked me, who was my teammate and my friend, what could I say? You do things sometimes for your friend. And I said, okay, Robert, I'm in. And he said, what about Tony? I said, he has no choice now. Because if Tony doesn't come, he's going to be the culprit, because he was asked and I went and he didn't. So he had to come. And but it was because of Bobby Orr that I said yes.
What about game 8? Paul Henderson scores and Canada beats Russia in that series. What's your memory of that game?
Well, it's a very vivid memory. I remember, and after the second period, I think we were down 5-3, I believe it was, or 5-2, 5-3, and I stood up, and somebody else stood up. I think it was Serge, and I just said, guys, we could beat these guys. We could score 3. It was 5-3, and we went out in that third period. And the other thing was, I said, let's try hard to stay away from penalties. Because this guy, Campella, who was not supposed to referee, but the Russians insisted upon it. And we finally gave in. I would have never given in. I would have said, screw you, we're going home. And but we gave in, and Campella was just awful. And so we didn't want to take the penalties. But that third period, years ago, Joe Namath said to me, Phil, there was one time when I played football that everything was in slow motion. And I threw the ball and it was in slow motion and everything else.
Wow.
I can tell you the goal that I scored in the third period with Peter Mahavlich went up the right side. He shot it in the corner, went in, bumped with Luchenko, number 3. Threw the puck out. I grabbed it, I put my hand up and threw it down and took a swipe and missed. And then the second one I shot and went in. That was in slow motion, Jeff. Never happened to me before, and it's never happened to me since. And it was such a visual that I could recollect that right now as we talk, how it was in slow motion and how I remember that play so vividly. And I do remember the last goal, obviously, because I wasn't coming off the ice until we scored. I wasn't. I didn't give a damn if it was whatever. And Henderson yelled at Peter to come off. Now, Paul later told us, he says, I just had this feeling I could score. Had this feeling. And he called Pete off with about 45 seconds to go. And he came into the corner in the back of the net and he got tripped, knocked down. In the meantime, I was skating through the slot from my right to my left, and the puck came out from number 2. I think it was Liapkin. Number 2's stick right on the dot to the right of the goalie, and I don't know how I got the shot away. I don't know, because I was almost backwards, and I was able to snap my wrist and get it on the net. In the meantime, they had forgotten about Paul. And he came, and it went on Tretiak, and for unexplained reasons, Tretiak just kicked the rebound straight out. Had he, because it wasn't a real hard shot, couldn't get much on it. And there was Paul right there, and he put it in. 34 seconds left in the game. And I thought, wow, I can't believe this. I mean, you don't think about it until after everything was over. But I remember saying to Paul, my Lord, I says, this is as close as I'm ever going to come to kissing another guy.
All right, fast forward 1979. You're in the Rangers dressing room before game 1 of the Stanley Cup final. Eastern Conference champion, New York Rangers in Montreal at the Forum. And the Rangers upset the hockey world that night. You win game 1. You could hear a pin drop in the Montreal Forum, and I was there.
Well, let me put it this way. You can't win in hockey, back then even when this is true, unless you had goaltending. And Johnny Davidson was spectacular against the Islanders. But for us, a lot of guys thought that we beat the Islanders, and that was our Stanley Cup. JD, that first game in Montreal, played really well. We all played well. Kenny Dryden did not play well. And there's no doubt about that because Bunny LaRock was going to start game 2. And then Dougie Riseborough hit him between the head. Boy, our luck. And then Dryden came in and he shut the door. But not only did he shut the door, their defense became so tight. And they were just a better team than us. But we hung in there. We lost 2 games by overtime. You know, so we hung in there. We weren't as good as them. We knew it. We had a lot of younger guys. After the first game, I went to Freddie Shero and I said, Freddie, I think our game was on a Thursday, first game, and we weren't going to play till Sunday afternoon. I said, we got to get out of this town. It's too good. We got too many young guys in this team. We got to get the hell out of Montreal. And he went, nah, we're okay. You know why? He wanted to stay there.
We've got a treat for our viewers here on the call. I'm going to bring back a memory for you, and we've got some video to prove it. You're not going to see it right now, but the people certainly will see it. Tell me about Hockey Sock Rock.
Oh,
star Phil Esposito.
Well, Alan Thicke, you know, Robin Thicke, diabetic, and his other son had diabetes. And Alan and I were really close, good friends. He was great friends with Wayne, too, Gretzky. And he said, Phil, I want to raise some money for juvenile diabetes. He says, and don't forget, this is 1979 when we were hot. We were hot in New York, boy, I'll tell you. You know, Duguay was on the move, and we had JD, and anyway, they wrote this song. I wish I could remember the other Canadian guy who won. He's won many, in fact, he's won Oscars for musical score and Emmys, and I can't remember his name right now, and I'm sorry. But they wrote this Hockey Sock Rock, and on the other side was Pardon My Misconduct with Dion, Simmer, and Taylor. And it was me, JD, Duguay, and Dave Maloney. I think we're the original 4. And I remember doing the video up on top of 34th Street, the Sky Rink. And the more brandy we drank, the better we sounded. Because it was cold up there. And we did this Hockey Sock Rock. Then I went to Los Angeles. And we voiced over my part of it so that I could sound half decent. And I remember Gloria Loring, which was Alan's wife at the time. She was there singing background, Valerie Harper, and a bunch of other people all singing background when we were doing this. And when I heard it after, I went, is that me? I said, hell, you guys can make me sound like Frank Sinatra, for crying out loud. And we raised $750,000 for JDF.
That's outstanding. That is.
Yeah, it really was.
19...
Got a gold record. I got a gold record. Because in Canada, I think it was a couple 100,000 sales and you got a gold record.
Incredible. I got a couple of other things to ask you before we go. One is, you went from player in New York to general manager and coach. What are your memories of those times, first as a coach and, of course, general manager?
Well, as soon as I retired, Craig Patrick Asif wanted to be an assistant coach and on the bench. That lasted like 2 weeks because he kept telling me, don't yell at the referees. Well, that ain't going to do it for me. And I just decided, no, I didn't want to do that. Then I was asked if Bill Chadwick was going to retire. I was asked if I wanted to be on television and do the analytical color, whatever you call it. And I said, that'd be perfect. That'd be a perfect job. I'd love that. Well, that happened for what, 3 or 4 years, I guess. And then they called me, and I went to the Hampshire House on Central Park West, and that's where a guy named Art Barron, who ran Paramount, had an apartment or a house. And we went there, and they wanted me to be the general manager. Jack Crumpy was there. And I said, I don't want to be the general manager. They said, well, we're going to let Craig Patrick go, and we want you to be the general manager. And I said, I don't want to do that. I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing. After about 10 or 15 minutes of going back and forth saying no, and they're saying, yeah, Art Barron looked at me, he said, listen, you either become the general manager or you don't work for Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
I says, okay, then I want more money than I ever made as a player. And they said, okay. I mean, okay, let's do it, right? And I became the general manager. But boy, the pressure of coaching and also general managing was way too much, way too much. And so we lost out, and they extended my contract another 4 years, so I had 5 years left now. And then they fired me. After I got fired, it was May, I think I got fired. I waited maybe till the end of June, not knowing what I wanted to do with myself, knowing that I couldn't afford to live in Bedford, New York with a 5,500 square foot home and the taxes, because my wife wanted horses. I knew I couldn't afford it after a couple of years. So I had to do something. And then I was talking to Louis Nanny, and he and I were on the marketing committee, and he says, you know, Phil, I think they're going to expand. And I just let it slide by. So I called John Ziegler 4 or 5 days later. I said, John, listen, I know I was on the marketing committee. I know we're talking about expansion. I'm interested. How do I go about getting an expansion franchise? He says, you can do this. And he told me what to do, but he said to me, stay away from Texas. Now, I didn't know that Minnesota was going to move to Dallas. And I said to him, well, I'm not interested in going to Texas. I want to go to Florida. And he said, that's perfect. He says, we could use a market in Florida because of television, you know, the whole sphere. Let's not forget, too, the only city that had two people vying for the franchise, or two groups, was Tampa Bay area. So I picked the Tampa Bay area. I did, because that's all he had was the Buccaneers. But they didn't have a building. And I knew we had to build the building no matter where we went. And that was a matter of time and, of course, raising the money. And I decided to Tampa. And I came down here in 1990, met with Henry Paul, who Gabe Paul was his dad. Gabe Paul was a general manager of the Yankees, Indians, Astros. And he was a baseball guy that wanted to get baseball in Tampa Bay area. Now they built the dome over there where they're still playing baseball, but they wouldn't even let me in the building. They would not. And I found out later why. Eagleson and his group, Carmana's group, were backdooring me and trying to get into the building and getting into there. But I had support from Billy Wirtz, Eddie Snyder, John Ziegler, Marcelo Boo, who was the other guy? Great support from these guys. And I went to every city and sat with the owner in the box and watched the game and talked about what I know I could get it done and all this other stuff. And you got to raise the money, so I need you guys to help me at the beginning just to give me the go-ahead, because I wasn't going to go and waste my life and not get it and not know what to do with the rest of my life if I didn't have some support. But I knew when I walked into the Breakers Hotel in West Palm, after all the meetings and everything else, the next day they're going to, as I walked in and all the owners stood up and chanted Espo, 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 Espo. I was like, I get goosebumps even thinking about it right now.
I'm getting them right now as well. Hey, Phil, player, one of the best in the history of the game, broadcaster, then coach, general manager, and then owner in Tampa, the founder, the man that brought hockey to Southwest Florida. What's your biggest accomplishment? Is that it?
For me, but you know what? I even drove the Zamboni 2 years ago because it was the only thing I didn't do. But that was fun too. I thought I was going to knock the boards out, but I didn't. But for me, the biggest accomplishment, look, God gave me talent to play hockey, and I exploited that talent. I took it as far as I could take it. And for me to be able to organize it was a feat that I didn't think I had. And it taught me something. You get good people around you that are smart, that are willing to go with what you tell them to do and get it done. You can do almost anything, but it's a team. And I'll never forget that because I really believe that teams win hockey games, teams win baseball games. Tennis, you're on your own. Golf, you're on your own. And those are the toughest sports because of it. Because when you have a teammate, I may screw up, and Jeff, you take care of it for that day, you know what I mean?
Phil, I can't thank you enough for this reminiscing. What a great life, what a great career, and what a great ambassador for our sport. Again, I really
Thank you, Jeff.
Here on the call with the great Phil Esposito. I look forward
Hey,
to
listen, I want to do this again with you sometime and talk about the way the game is played nowadays, because when you look at these old classics, holy crap, what a difference.
We'll do that. I'll bring you back again.
You got it.
Stay safe and stay healthy.
You too. Take care, Jeff. Bye-bye.